Evening, everyone. Excellent. Wonderful to see you all here again for another Peaceful Solution class. You can be seated. Thank you for joining us. If you are joining us online there, welcome again. It's glad to see everybody here. As we continue to move forward here in the 5th unit of the intermediate series, which is the responsibility unit, we are in we're finishing up chapter 3 this evening, picking up where Chris left off in the What I Have Learned section, which is on page 60. And he covered the first 4 points there. The first 4 points, and this is the chapter called I Have a Responsibility to Myself. And we are on point number 5. Point number 5 here. Just open up my book and get it ready. And where he left off, I'm picking up. It says, I must also be responsible about my feelings in regard to the opposite sex. By making responsible choices and behaving appropriately, I can demonstrate true interest in someone by respecting them. And that's something that it seems like you got to reiterate even more so in this time period, even from when these books were written in the early 2000s there, because even though there was a lot that was being presented in the media, from movies and not so much video games in the early 2000s. I mean, there were probably some things in video games, not like what you find on video games today with games like Grand Theft Auto and I don't even know what all the other ones that are out there. But a lot of these multiplayer, first person shooter games or whatever, they have cut scenes in the games, and the cut scenes are kind of in between different levels or modes that you might go through, and they're kind of a realistic thing. Now it's all computer generated, but in that, I mean, it's like a movie. It's like literally sitting there watching movies, and some people have actually put in the developers have put whole movies together off of those scenes, that not is shown in the movie theater or anything like that, but you can find on various platforms that people can watch. And there's a lot of sexual innuendo and immodest dress and things like that, violence and so forth in those types of things. And so there's a lot easier availability to these influences that are coming to the young people today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And so the influence and the pressure is there because young people have been going through hormonal changes and hitting puberty for thousands of years, right? And of course, with proper education and so forth, they can handle these, emotions. And, I remember the old saying, you don't go take a cold shower or something like that, some people are able to actually go dip into some of these ice ponds outside, just to kind of get themselves kind of shuck back up, their mind straight. Because if a person is completely overwhelmed by these and they're feeding their thoughts with these things, and they're gonna look for ways and opportunities to gratify this. Essentially, it's a lustful feeling, and that's where people get into trouble with engaging in premarital sex. Some people they're so out of touch with how to handle themselves that sometimes even rape or molestation of others come into play as well. So it's necessary that we get to the point and teach them to be at a point where they're responsible about their feelings in regard to the opposite sex and respecting them. Now, this is respect that goes into play or comes into play when we practice self-control by not just going and taking something or someone that we might desire. And if we look back to page 54, we see here where it started talking about this topic under matters of the heart. Now, the heart, you got to be very, very careful of it because that is where our desires come from. And a lot of decisions are made, sadly, a lot of decisions are made based on desires more so than facts, more so than logic, more so than considering the outcome of those decisions. And in other words, a lot of decisions pushed by or influenced by desires become impulsive. And once they're made, you can't go back and undo them. You can't go back and un unvirginize yourself or unrape someone or unpregnant, become unpregnant. Now, of course, they've got what they have called abortions nowadays, but that doesn't change the fact that what was initiated took place in the person's body. You can't go back and undo certain of these decisions that are made. Even when we talked a little bit about the STDs and how many people, Chris mentioned how in Texas here, syphilis is on it never was really on a decline. It just kind of was hiding for a period of time, but it's continuing to become a big problem. And those in the health establishment, National Institutes of Health, CDC, people in the medical profession, doctors of virology, and so forth, they're seeing this rise and they're worried that people aren't going to take this seriously because a lot of people who have these STDs are asymptomatic, right? They're not showing any symptoms, so they think everything's well, everything's safe. I'm not breaking out, or I'm not having any, things coming out of my body. I don't have any sores and everything, so I can continue to live free and do whatever I want with whomever I want. Well, these viruses that, even though they might be laying, you know, dormant, so to speak, in your body, as was mentioned before, they're still doing damage. And if you remember some of the pictures that I brought to one of the classes previously, when we were talking about some of these risk-taking behaviors and how I showed the picture of the syphilitic skull, of the syphilitic nose, how they could actually tell when they did the autopsies on these people that they actually had the disease of syphilis, because it would literally eat through. Now, this was taking place underneath the person's skin. Sometimes there would be outbreaks on the skin, on the face, and so forth. But it would literally eat through the bone, the skull, and we know how hard our heads can be sometimes, But this little tiny little bug, this microorganism that was sexually acquired, sexually, from someone, either from that person or they got it congenitally, being passed from mother to child, made its way. This is what they call tertiary, or the third stage, the three stages of the syphilis, up into the brain area, the cranium, and ate through the bone and then got into the brain. Now, not always does it go that route, but it does eventually get to the brain, and people go into delirium and confusion. And it was funny because a lot of the doctors, they called them kind of, quack medicine back then, because they wanted to blame a lot of things on STDs. But the fact was, a lot of things were the result of STDs at that time. And they might not have had as much of a technical advancements and being able to see microscopically, being able to see microscopically what was taking place in the person's body, but they had an idea that these things did make their way to the brain, and they did affect the way the person thought and the way that they act. And they got to the point where they had to take a lot of these people and they threw them in insane asylums, and like some call them loony bins and crazy houses and so forth, just to kind of try to keep a handle on them. Sadly, a lot of those people went through horrible treatment, experiments, lobotomies, and just all types of, they used to give them lithium and all types of experimental drugs to try to, they tried to control the brain, and they were doing a lot of research and study on the brain, trying to get a grasp of how it functioned, right? Because they were really trying to understand it. They knew that something was taking place, but they didn't quite understand all the parameters of it. So, like I said before, engaging in these risk-taking behaviors can lead to, consequences that can come years down the road. And even you might not necessarily see or experience that consequence coming out of your body or showing up in your mind, but it might come out in your child, right? Might come out in your grandchild. I mentioned before, it kind of just, of course, you don't like to see anybody suffer, of course, but, it really is disturbing to see, a newborn child, or a toddler or somebody who's 4 or 5 years of age, developing these terminal diseases. And you know that they haven't even lived long enough to do anything to bring that consequence into their body. So it had to be something that was passed genetically, and not necessarily blaming the parents for it. Could it be from the grandparents or the great grandparents? Who knows, right? But these things take place, but they're the result of the choices that somebody made at some point in their life. And so this is where, as teachers, we want to really try to impress in the minds of our students, in this kind of situation, it's better to use that ounce of prevention than to try to deal with that pound of cure. Nowadays, you got to use 10 or 15 or 20 pounds of cure, right? Because everything is resistant to all the antibiotics that they have out there. Everything, all the microorganisms are resistant to antibiotics. I was looking at um, a woman. She was reading an article about a woman who she went into the hospital for fluid in her lungs. She had pneumonia, and somehow, while she was in the hospital, that pneumonia developed an infection in her body, in her lungs, in her body, and her body went septic. She developed sepsis. She was 50, 51 years old. She's still alive. 51 years old. And anyway, it moved to her limbs, and it basically, she went in with a lung infection. She left out minus arms and legs. They had to end up cutting them off, and they actually had a picture of her from like here down, and then from like the knee down, it was completely black because it was dead. The infection had gotten, and I'm sure that they were pumping her body full of all the antibiotics that they possibly could. That's like the very first thing that they do, but it wasn't doing any great, right? This is how strong the bad microorganisms have gotten in this time period, because the medical profession, and now they're trying to do the best that they can. They're fighting a losing battle, though, because more antibiotics is not going to stop the disease. you know the disease is not the cause. It's the choices and the actions of the individuals partaking in immoral behaviors due to a lack of education, right? That is causing these things to take place. So we need to put more time putting verbal or lesson antibiotics in the minds of the people so that they can make better choices. So then we won't have to have all these things. I mean, a person who's generally healthy, if something occurs and they get a little infection, or something gets a little out of whack and they get a little staph infection or something, they could take a basic antibiotic and it'll clear it up right away. Because they're not fighting all these different other things. Sometimes they can just use other simple things, that natural foods that have antibiotics in them. Many things, even doctors will recommend to restore your gut health, so that you can have a healthy balance, so your immune system could do what it needs to do to keep your body healthy. That's what's fighting all the time for you. But getting back to this here, these matters of the heart, these are consequences. These are things way down the line that young people don't think about. They don't think about, having to, be incapacitated. Some of these, I've heard of instances of very, very young uh, ladies who uh, started becoming sexually active at a very young age, and sadly, they became pregnant. And some of these pregnancies can do, because they're so young, can do permanent harm to their physical structure, because they're not ready to handle that yet. And they can get to the point where they can't have children even later on in life. Some of the STDs can also create sterility in both men and women as well. So these are the things, as teachers, we have to put in the minds of our students. Yes, it might sometimes be a little uncomfortable to do it, but I would rather, you deal with the uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, telling them about this now, than have to be uncomfortable standing in front of their coffin later because they were never educated or they didn't have the opportunity to be educated or were given it, but no one showed it to them. No one told it to them. No one pointed out that, hey, these are some of the things that you're going to run into if you engage in these risk taking behaviors. So, yes, a lot of this is on the shoulders of the teachers. When we have this knowledge, it's not enough to just know it and keep it to ourselves. We're learning this so that we can teach others. Now, if you go back to page 54 here, regarding point 5 on page 60 under matters of the heart, it says another important part of being responsible for yourself is learning how to keep your emotions under control. Remember, when these young men and women at this age, they're going through this hormonal change of puberty and so forth, and every single one of us have gone through it. We know what it is, there's a lot that goes on. And without the proper guidance now, in a lot of schools, they had sex education. Sometimes that made it worse, right? Because it put things in the minds of the children that they weren't even thinking about. And now parents are fighting. They're really fighting because they're having an issue with what their children are being taught in the schools. A lot of parents, they don't want their children taught, that there's 800 different genders out there, right? They don't want their children being taught by somebody who has a different ideology on what healthy relationships or healthy sex is. Okay. And they're standing up and they're fighting, against this and saying, no, teach my children the basics, we'll do, or we'll get someone else to teach them these other things on morality. And so you see that taking place. There's a lot of debates because some of the schools right now, they're considering allowing religions to come into the school. This has been a big separation for a long period of time, but they're considering allowing chaplains to come into the school and to counsel the students. And I've seen that one of the organizations are getting really excited about it because they want to, with the freedom of speech, they're ready to get in there and and put their spin on things as well. Well, anyway, it says it probably seems like overnight when you went from thinking that the opposite sex was gross and yucky to not so bad after all. Once again, you are faced with another irony of adolescence. Your body might have literally matured overnight, awakening feelings that you did not know existed. Yet, you're not old enough to marry the object of your affection. So, what should I do with all these pent up emotions? And then you see here, it's bold and underlined, right? And then it's a larger font size than everything else. So, this, as a teacher, we need to really, really draw the students' attention to this point here because it's underneath their control. It's their responsibility to control those emotions, right? In order for them to control their emotions, they're going to have to control their thoughts so that they don't go off and act on emotions that are fed by uncontrolled or immoral thoughts and then suffer a consequence later on. That's right. You have to control your emotions. You have an obligation and a responsibility to control yourself and to the object of your affection to practice self-control. And of course, as you see here, that we live in society, the society we live in does not make this easy to do. And that's so very true. Here in Texas, it stays, pretty warm and people tend to, dress for the occasion, so to speak, and I come from an area where it was mostly cold. Well, not mostly cold, but we had longer winters than you do here in Texas. I think a winter here in Texas is about 7 to 10 days long on average. Seems like anyway, right? Right now, this February, we've been experiencing pretty warm weather right now. Normally, this is one of our coldest months, but not complaining. Just saying, on average, up north where I'm from in Ohio, when it gets about September, October, the colds start coming in. It stays pretty much until, April, May. Okay. And I was telling someone, I actually look forward to the winter here in Texas because people start dressing more. you know, I mean, I would actually like to just go to the store and just not have to worry about, seeing things hanging out and jiggling all over the place, because, people aren't, they don't dress modestly anymore. People, it almost, you wonder if they even care when they leave the house. But the fact of the matter is, they're just not taught, right? They're not taught to have respect for themselves, and they're not taught to have respect for others, that are around them. I think I wouldn't want my children to see those things because we don't conduct ourselves, we don't dress like that in the house, so I don't want to put that confusion in their minds if they were to go out in the public and wonder, why is this person, dressed like that or looking like that. Of course, you have to teach them and explain them if they are in those environments, but it's something that we really strive to guard our children against seeing those things. Of course, you can't protect their eyes from seeing everything, and a lot of the students that you deal with on a regular basis, this is just normal. I've seen a woman who had a kind of a rant going on because she was at one of the very big popular box store, and she was kind of upset about some of the clothing items that were on the racks that were designed for 6 to 8 year old girls, and how the clothing was very revealing, you know, and she was very upset about it. And a lot of people that were commenting in the post were, they were upset about it too. It's like, where's our society going? Right? Where is our society going where they're designing clothes and selling them in, regular stores for our young children who haven't even reached pubescence age yet? Not that it would be right that they wear those things at that age either, but where they have these revealing, provocative clothing for them, right? And of course, the young people see it and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we want to do that. That's just cool. That's what everybody's wearing and so forth." So this puts an even harder job on the parent to try to guard and protect their children and to guide their mind into modesty and so forth because they know the outcome of that. Now, if you look on page 55, it says, with sex literally everywhere and none of the consequences broadcast with equal fervor, it is even more important to become to become responsible and learn now how to control your feelings before you make a decision you will regret. And that is so very true. Even when I was growing up and we used to watch a lot of the shows. Now, a lot of the shows that I watched when I was growing up, they still you typically never saw into because they were mostly family oriented shows. They were starting to kind of get away from that later on, but you never really saw into like the parents' bedrooms. And when you did see into the parents' bedrooms, oddly enough, the mother had a bed over here, there was a nightstand in the middle, and then the father had a bed over there. And if they were talking at night, they were talking across the room, right? You didn't see any of those things. It was just a lot different, era, when we were growing up. Sadly, those things kindly went away, when what they showed on the television, and things that they did show that were a little more, you know, your discretion is advised. That came on later. That came on later when the children were supposed to be in bed, right? But they were upstairs watching the black and white TV, adjusting the bunny ears so they can see what mom and dad didn't want them to see, right? And so things change, but it's more prevalent today than it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now, if you look down to the next paragraph on page 55, it says, although the media makes it appear that when you like someone, you should automatically have sex with him or her, this is far from the truth. And then here, underlined here, this next point, it says, you have an obligation and a responsibility to yourself and to others to control your emotions. Having a crush or interest in someone does not give you the right to touch him or her in a sexual way. In fact, if you really care about someone, you should show respect by not encouraging risky behavior because it's not just something you're doing, you're encouraging. You in a lot of cases, it's pressuring. It's pressuring the person, to engage in risky behavior. Oh, come on, don't you love me? Don't you want to be with me? I'll be with you forever. I'll take care of you, even though I'm only like 13, right? you know, I can ask my mom and dad to bump my allowance up. We can live in the basement. Said no 13-year-old ever, right? but that pressure to fit in or to be accepted or to engage in risk-taking behavior, like I mentioned before, and as all the teachers have mentioned before, they can have lifelong consequences. In fact, according to the National Institutes of Health, now this was a study that they done, and it's interesting because if you ever go, as a teacher, and you try to get some of these statistics to back up some of these articles here, the National Institutes of Health and the CDC, they've done a lot of research when it comes to the youth and relationships and STD rates and sexual health and so forth. Because it's a big problem in our society. We can't get around. We can't ignore it. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. But they show here. Now, this was a study that was taken in 2011, and it was talking about youth's adolescence and relationships. And it says 66% of adolescents report dating and relationships in the U.S., and 70% reported having sexual intercourse by their late teens. And in the culture that we have today, you don't necessarily have to have one to have the other. You don't necessarily have to be in a relationship or be dating, to engage in these other activities, because people don't even care about that. What's called we've mentioned before, the hookup culture. They have whole sites that are dedicated to just that very thing. We don't need to talk. I don't need to know your name. I don't need to get to know you. I don't need to know where you live, what you do, or anything. This is all we're meeting and getting together for. Where's society gonna go? With that type of mentality, we're slowly but surely, killing ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're doing great harm to ourselves, bringing about sickness, disease, and eventually death much sooner than you'd normally have if you're living a healthy life. All right. So the next point, bullet point 6 there, it says, I can say no to negative peer pressure. And of course, someone forcing or trying to pressure you to engaging in risk-taking behavior is something you should definitely say no to. But it's not only that, it can include alcohol and drugs and so forth. On page 58, we see here it says, you too can say no. When it comes to being responsible to yourself, you too can say no when faced with negative conformity in the form of friends trying to convince you that everybody's doing it, right? This is something we've mentioned before, quote unquote, everybody's doing it. And like Chris have said, Williams mentioned before, David has too, no, everybody's not doing it. But this is the argument that's used to make you look more like the outsider, make you look more like the oddball, make you look like you're not cool, you're not fitting in, if you don't do it. Now, despite that pressure or that influence or that push coming from the other person, remember, and this is the power that we can give to our students, you have the power to still say no. You don't have to allow that person who's pressuring you to win you over, right? To seduce you into doing something that you don't want to do, right? When someone's seducing another, they're using all types of convincing arguments, justifications or swaying words to get you to follow their will or go along with what they're wanting to do. And most of the time, it's not to benefit you, it's to benefit themselves only. And so, in teaching our young men and women about this, we want them to remember that, when we talked about peer pressure, it's the pressure we put on ourselves, it's an internal pressure as well to fit in. Well, yeah, I want to be your friend. I want to do this, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to do drugs. I don't want to get drunk. I don't want to do alcohol, right? I don't want to have sex, right? And if you're truly my friend, you will respect my decision and not try to force me to change my mind. In fact, I'm going to just go home right now. I'm feeling very uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. No. They always have an option. No one can say, oh, I didn't have any choice. I didn't have any other choice. No, we always have a choice. We just have to stop and think about our choices. A lot of times people make bad choices because deep down inside, they really want to make those choices. So we have to now bring this back and tie this back into what we just covered. We have to bring the emotions under control. Can't just do what feels good, right? Or what will make us happy. We have to do what's right. And we can't just think about the here and now. We've got to think long term down the road. They've got to think long term down the road. So he says, trying a drug just once won't hurt you, or over drinking uh, alcohol helps you deal with stress. These are some of the excuses that are given. Um, you can politely and firmly say no, but say it like you mean it. If you hesitate or say it like you're not sure, your friend will think you're just playing around. And you might take the opportunity when you go over this in class to get them to practicing saying no, right? Let me hear your best no. "Mm, No. I really shouldn't. you know? Come on, say it like you mean it. No, right? Get them to say it. Get them to be comfortable with saying no because a lot of times it makes them feel uncomfortable to stand up against their friend. Remember, a true friend will not encourage you to do something that's immoral. A true friend will not encourage you to engage in risk taking behaviors. A true friend is going to encourage and motivate you towards things that are going to help you build and maintain your positive character. Now, granted, they need to be trained on what a positive character is to begin with, right? But if you find yourself in a situation and around people like that, it might be time to kind of distance themselves from them, right? And as teachers and parents and adults and counselors and so forth, this is where we come in and try to plant these seeds in their mind to get them to think. And of course, we're not going to make them pick their friends one way or the other, but we want to give them the information like we covered in the acceptance unit. Got to go all the way back there. It's chapter 4, right? To help them to have the knowledge and the skills to know what to look for in selecting a friend, choosing who they associate with. Because as we mentioned before, friends have a tremendous influence on us, on one another. So it says this will give them the opportunity to try to talk you into something wrong, something that's wrong. Be strong when you say no, and then stand firm, because sometimes people don't back down. They'll back down a little bit, but then they'll come back with a stronger attack, or they'll come back with a different argument, or they'll come back and they might bring your other friend. Oh Steve did it. I don't know, he's just fine. He still gets straight C's, right? He's a straight C student. Or Betty does it. I don't think nobody's named Betty anymore, but she does it. No, so they'll come back. They'll keep bringing different arguments. But if you stand strong and you say no, I've noticed over time, and just not only in my teenage years, but also as an adult, certain people, they don't bring certain convincing arguments to you when they know where you stand, right? Because they know, hey, I'm not going to get anywhere with that guy. I might as well not even say anything. Plus, I don't have time to hear about this peaceful solution and self control and making right choices and then blah 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 blah. They don't want to hear you preaching to the choir, so to speak. Because that's what they're going to get. Now, then why are you trying to convince me to do that? Do you know the harm that can take place if you engage in something like that? Why would I want to do something that will kill my brain cells? Why would I want to ruin my lungs? Why would I want to ruin my reputation? Why would I want to harm my health or anything like that? So they tend to stay away from people they know that they can't convince to do those things, right? Doesn't mean they don't try somebody else. Don't let any amount of teasing or name calling uh make you change your mind. Don't get talked into something you will eventually regret. And then if you look down at the very bottom there in that bold section, bold words, it says friends don't talk friends into making bad choices. You see that? Friends don't talk friends. I remember, the author saying one time at a seminar we were having, he said that, relationships, are started with talking, with communication, right? And this is something that we have to, and it's any relationship, right? Not just between a man or a woman, but friends and so forth, work, coworkers, and things of that nature. But friends don't talk friends into making bad choices, right? If anything, you want to talk your friend out of making bad choices. But that's really what you have the power to do. It's through your words, through your mouth, right? The things you say they have the power to build up or tear down the other person. Excuse me. All right, let's go back here to page 60 here. It says, I have a responsibility to take my education seriously. Oh, wait. Yes, I have a responsibility to take my education seriously and to work to the best of my ability. And if we go back to page 59, this is a little bit where Chris left off last time. This is what the lesson's saying here, last but not least, as you grow physically, you have an obligation to yourself to develop mentally as well and to continuously seek ways to develop and improve your character. Uh, Another way you can do this is by gaining the most education you can. Don't take school lightly and play around, watch TV, or hang out with friends when you should be studying. And we're going to see as we get into the next chapter on time management why that is so very important, of how it can affect your education. Putting forth the time, putting forth the effort when you have it, because that's one thing you don't get back. You don't get back time. Once it's gone, it's gone. That second, it's gone. We're never going to get that second again, right? So we want to make sure we're using it wisely. And this opportunity and time that, our students have to learn everything that they can learn right now, because it can be too late when they're faced with that situation. They're faced with having to make a moral choice. And they go, ah, what did the teacher say in that peaceful solution class? I don't. Oh, well, guess I'm just going to do what feels great. All right. And then there's suffer the consequences from it. All right. Sometimes it's just too late at the time. So paying attention now, taking the education serious, and like Chris said, there's certain subjects that we enjoy, people enjoy more than others. Certain subjects that people enjoy much less than others. But the fact is, you just got to eat the lima beans. Remember I said about the lima beans? I never liked lima beans when Mom used to make them. So I really try to hurry up and get those gross things in my mouth first so I can focus on the applesauce and the chicken. All right. That's what we got to do. You have to do it because I wasn't leaving the table until I finished food. Mom did not believe in wasting food, right? I thought I was being funny and dumped a whole bunch of sugar on my rice and, oh, I can't finish it. Nope. I sat there till the rice was cold and pasty, and I had to finish it. I don't know if I got diabetes that day or not, but I didn't do that anymore with my rice, to say the least. But there are certain things that we have to take. They're requirements. So just do it and get it out of the way. And that's what I try to instill in a lot of young people that we've dealt with in times past and even right now. Hey, listen, just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean it's immoral. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Do it with a positive attitude. Get it done, and then it's done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Sitting there going, oh man, I hate this, or I don't like this. Or, well, you know what? After all that griping and moaning and complaining, you still got it in front of you. Right? Remember what I said you don't get back? Time. So you spent 15 minutes griping. You could have been 15 minutes further along getting that thing that you didn't like completed. So this is something we've got to put in the minds of, because young people don't think about that. They think if they sit there and they gripe and they moan and complain and throw a fit in the tantrum, that mom and dad or teacher, or counselor is going to go, okay, you made a convincing point. I see how you really, really, really don't like to follow instructions. So I'm just going to let you do whatever you want to do. No, it doesn't work that way, right? They'll sit back and let you do your thing, and then you'll still have to uphold that responsibility later. So getting them to think beyond the emotion, and that's a challenge. Getting a young person to think beyond the emotion and think logically and the purpose or the goal. What are they wanting to do, right? Well, if you go ahead and get this other thing out of the way, then you'll have more time to do what you really want to do. And sometimes people don't realize that until later. They're like, oh man, after all this, I only got 15 minutes to go outside and, ride my bike. Wow, if I would have did what mom and dad told me at the very beginning, I would have had a whole hour to go outside, ride my bike. And they do learn, after trial and error sometime. They find out their parents really aren't against them. They're really on their side, or their teacher's not against them. They're on their side. They're trying to help them to become successful in life. If you look at the very last paragraph there on page 59 on this education point, it says, so in addition to all the other ways that were discussed in this chapter on being responsible to yourself and getting an education, getting an education to the list. Becoming an educated person is something you must do. You must do. In fact, it's so important, it's number one on the traits for positive character. Getting an education, getting the facts, making sure they're correct. Because many people will spin you with deep fakes out there to make you think that just because you said it, it's fact. Just because they said it, it's fact. It's funny. I was watching it wasn't a TED Talks. It was something that was put on by one of the uh, colleges, and it had a group of speakers there, and they were talking. I think the topic was like the power of words, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the guy, one of the speakers, came out and he lit up a cigarette, and he started to light up a cigarette. Now this was in the auditorium, and he put a cigarette in his mouth and he took out a lighter, and then I guess in the audience there were people gasping like, "Whoa, like what are you doing? We're enclosed. There's no smoking in here," and so forth. And he's like, "What?" You know, and he said, um, he started to go over some statistics. He says, more people die from diabetes than they do from smoking, but none of you would have had a problem with it if I pulled out a Snickers, you know. And then he went on to give some other statistics about, the main cause of lung cancer, is not from smoking cigarettes, but it's due to genetics, and more people die from this. And he gave a bunch of other statistics. And he said, I use these arguments when I was sitting down with my friends at our last social gathering, even though I just made them up. But at the time, he had the whole audience convinced that these were facts. And the point was, he was saying words articulated in a certain way can be very convincing to the listener that these are facts. And as William brought out in one of the classes, we have to make sure that the facts we're getting are true facts, which means we have to do a little investigation on our part, right? Don't just take it for what it's worth, because there's a lot of misinformation that is out there today, especially on the internet. In fact, they've got whole websites and blogs and so forth. Even I think NPR has a thing where they've got their fact checkers, right? This is something that came out in the news recently. And then they have the fact checking department go out there. And a lot of times they find this is absolutely not true, right? But it came out for everybody to hear. And everybody's tweeting about it and talking about it, and they've got their opinions, and some people are getting upset about it. I can't believe this and that, all to find out that it was fake, right? Fake news, as Trump says. It's fake news. You're fired. All right. So it says here, becoming an educated person is something you must do for yourself. No one else can do it for you. Your teachers, your parents, they can take all the books in the library and set them in front of you. They can get all the DVDs and play the classes on a particular topic. But you're the only one who can learn. You can choose to learn. Like the old saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? You can put a student in the classroom, but you can't make them learn. Now, if they'll see the importance of an education and how it can benefit them down the road, right? Or how the lack thereof will cause them to potentially miss out on a lot of things down the road. And as we mentioned before, a lot of times young people, they make decisions because they don't have all the facts. They don't understand all the consequences. So that's our job as teachers, to try to paint that picture for them, to, give them a more well-rounded source of information so they can make better decisions for themselves. And so back to page 60 here, we see, by learning to be responsible, I am now building a successful future for myself. All right, and that's the last point there on that page there. Let me see here. I just wanted to make sure something. Yeah, okay. So Chris covered the procedure 9 in the last class there. Let's look at the very bottom of page 60. It says, break the chain. Break the chain. And you see that's real big, bold. In fact, I want to show you this here picture. I'm a little overhead slide there. when you look at that, when you look at that picture, now we see a chain there, but if you were to look at that picture and describe what you see in one word, you what would you say? You see a what? Now think, um, what's the word? Kind of outside the box. What would you see there? What was that? Links, right? That could be hot links. Kind of get my mouth watering. Say it again. I couldn't hear him. Oh, pretzel. Oh, somebody's hungry. Pattern, right? A repeating pattern. Okay. So when you think about that, this phrase here, break the chain, right? We want to break the repeating pattern. Now, granted, yes, there are links there, they're joining one to another, but that pattern, when you think about even the chain in regards to how they're linked together, what takes place at the very end of that chain is determined by what takes place at the other end of the chain. If you've ever pulled a vehicle or hoisted something, right, laterally or up and down vertically, right? If that chain pulls in this direction, the end of it pulls, right? If you give it slack, there's slack at the other end, and so forth. So each link affects the other link. Now, of course, we know that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. In this case, right, you could be the link, the new link that is weakened by those negative behaviors. Not you've become weakened, but you don't practice them anymore. You give strength to things that you pay attention to, you focus on, and you practice. So you don't focus on the negative anymore. You focus on the positive. So you'll break that chain or that cycle of behavior. In fact, this definition of this word chain here, I guess I'll put it down here. We can read. I didn't get a slide for you today, but it is a sequence of items of the same type forming a line, okay, which could be metaphorically even like a pattern of behavior. Figuratively, a series of associated things or people or experiences. And of course, we see, as we're going to read here, a little bit of the definition of why the chain needs to be broken. This is something that can go on from generation to generation. Also, type of or a series, similar things placed in order or happening one after another. And notice there, it's a series, sequence, succession, string, etc. So a series of behaviors, a series of choices, a series of influences, a series of things that a person takes in and values will determine the choices that they make in the future. Remember the factors that help to make up our genetics, one of them are family values, influences, and the environment. And what a person gets in though with those factors, it starts to shape and mold their personality and their character, which determines the choices that they make later on in life. So we see here underneath this break the chain, and of course, how is this broken? It's broken through education, right? We're breaking the cycle of miseducation or a lack of education, because you can receive bad education too, right? You can read like Chris talked about in the previous class. People aren't born racist. No, they're taught it. So that's miseducation. That's bad education. And then you have where people aren't taught at all, right? That's a lack of education. So we break this chain. Children who come from abusive homes usually grow up to be abusers themselves and make the same mistakes with their children that their parents made with them. Break the chain. Learn to be responsible for your actions so you will never do anything that will harm another person. And as we're in this responsibility unit, we need to also learn to take accountability for it. We were teaching a class this morning overseas in Africa, and we were talking to some of the men. We were teaching out of the More Excellence in the Workplace unit, and we were talking about, when you're the person who's accused of disrespect. And we were talking about being accountable for your actions. And even if you unintentionally disrespected someone, when it's brought to your attention, don't make excuses. Don't bring about justifications about it. just take accountability for it and say, you know what, I didn't realize that. I apologize, right? Because it looks more, it has more honor, right? You look more like a person of integrity when you take accountability for it. Yeah, you know what, I did do that. I realized I did it. I did not realize that that was disrespectful to you. I apologize. I'll be more mindful of that in the future. And then you can work the conflict out and then move on. But when you're like, oh well, you shouldn't have took it that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. That's sometimes people's way of apologizing. You need to apologize. Well, I'm sorry he feels that way, right? Now that's not making matters any better. That's adding fuel to the fire. All right. So let's move on here to lesson plan 4, page C. Ooh, nope, I went too far. Lesson plan 4, page A. And we're going to get into chapter 4 here. And this is entitled TikTok, TikTok. This is in no association with the social media platform, right? This came out long before that platform did. But TikTok, TikTok, time management. And this is, and we're under the note to the teacher. Again, this is lesson plan 4, page A, and this is chapter 4 of the responsibility unit. And under the note to the teacher, it says, in today's fast-paced world, schedules are filled with all sorts of extracurricular activities. Most families stay so busy that their only time to come together is over a meal. Usually, not always. In today's day and age, it's foods in the fridge, or foods in the microwave, or foods in the oven. I have to run to a meeting, or I have to do this, or I'm going to be out of town, or whatever. And so you're seeing a lot more of a disconnect of the family with the schedules the way they are right now. For many, that occurs while going through the drive-through of their preferred fast food restaurant. This is how they have their meals and their family gatherings. Despite busy schedules, children are not always taught how to manage their time. Parents struggle with getting their children up in the morning, while teachers contend with those straggling in late for class or forgetting to make time for their homework the night before. As the old popular saying was when I was growing up, my dog ate my homework. Right? I did it, but my dog ate it. Right? Or I have a very vicious kitty that ate my homework. Or whatever the case might be, and children will come up with all types of excuses. It's like if they will put forth the effort in doing their homework that they do with coming up with excuses, they would be excellent fictional writers, you know. But it's just a matter of time management, and this is something that's pretty essential, right? I mean, this is something that affects every aspect of our life, and if they learn it now at a very young age, it'll be much easier when they transition into adulthood because the things are based on time. In fact, I was looking at a study that was showing that let's see here, did I still have it? It was about the amount of time that's lost in the workplace, and it was showing that um, the amount the amount of time that's lost in the workplace, it's like it costs companies like $588 billion a year for lost productivity. Okay, a lost productivity, almost over a $500 billion a year in lost productivity because time's being wasted because people come in late or they get distracted, from their job or whatever. Someone distracts them or they distract themselves, and then it takes them so many minutes. I'll have to find the article for you. It takes them so many minutes to get back, 25 minutes to get back. I think it was 25 onto the task at hand. So imagine being distracted, 5 times a day, right? That's like what like, that's a lot of time, right? Despite busy schedules, children are not always taught how to manage their time. Parents struggle with getting their children up in the morning, while teachers contend with those straggling in late for class or forgetting their homework. Now, notice here it says we're getting into what we're going to be focusing on in this lesson. It says this lesson will focus on the following issues, and we have 4 points here. Time management, which is point number 1, is an important tool in maintaining responsible character, right? Because when people are on time, it's very important. People value that. I mean, we might we might have situations where we're late, you know, but we appreciate when somebody else is on time. We prefer them to be on time. Even if I'm a little late, at least you could be on time. At least you could do is show me that much respect, you know. I tell the guys that I work with, I say, you know, I would much rather be waiting on my customer to show up than my customer waiting on me, right? You know, that just people appreciate that. The value of time, this is point number two, the value of time management in regards to responsibility. This is one of the lessons, the issues that's going to be focusing on, which is the value of time management in regards to responsibility. The ability to differentiate, and this is very important here because again, remember we talked about you know, emotions and desires and so forth. It's important to instill in the mind of the student the difference between wants and needs, because sometimes, like personality and character, they'll get those things confused. And then they'll start thinking, you know, oh, I need this. I've got to have it. No, you just want it, right? Things you need are essential for your health, your well being, your character, and so forth. You know, things you want, yeah, you can't do without it. You can do without that double mocha chai latte frappuccino swing bing bing bada bada, you know, that you get from Starbucks on the way to school in the morning, right? You could actually do without that. I don't know all the names they have. All I know is coffee. That's that's all I know. But they've got everything under the sun nowadays. All right. So another point, number three, it says the need to organize and prioritize in order to better manage various tasks and obligations. And you know, that can be a challenge. Trying to get trying to get a young person to understand why they should have an organized space, whether it's a desk, whether it's a room, a workplace, whatever the case might be, because when you're organized, it's easier to find things, right? And when you prioritize, it's easier to meet your goals because you know, well, I need to do A first, then B, then C, right? When you start off and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to willy nilly do it, I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants and we're just going to get it done. We're going to wing it today. Well, you got C done and you got A done, but you didn't make the grade because you didn't get B done. So when you prioritize, you're able to look and see, kind of have a visual of what you need to do, and then you can go step by step by step. But it helps us to better manage various tasks and obligations when organization and prioritization is a factor. And then lastly, it says the benefit the benefit of learning how to manage time and to structure days, and how this in turn also benefits others. So now we're seeing here how the actions that us as individuals, the student who is learning this information, how they benefit themselves, but also how they're benefiting others by being responsible with their time management, which is including everything that we're talking about here that we just covered in the previous 3 points is going to be discussed in this chapter. And then at the very bottom of the page, it says, "This lesson, this lesson should help our youth to become more responsible in time management, which will improve their overall positive character development." And that's something I tell you just on a personal level. You know, when I have things organized and you know laid out before me in a priority type manner, because sometimes it might be difficult, and this is where stopping and thinking and getting certain facts and understanding, you know, well, this is an assignment that I have and this one's due on Wednesday, this one's due on Friday, this one's going to require this much work, this one's going to require this much work, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, right? That's where you get into, you know, organization and prioritizing what needs to be done first, right? Or you know, I want to go out and I want to, you know, go play soccer with my friends, but I really got to work on this book report. Well, you got to prioritize what's important, get the work done first, and then you can have time for play later. So it's going to help them improve their overall positive character development, because remember all the things that they're learning here, that they're continuing to learn from the previous units. They have to organize and prioritize those things as well in their lives and the choices and the decisions that they make. Even prioritizing, their friends and the things that they want to do with their friends over their character, right? What's more important, having friendship or having a positive character? Now, granted, having friendship is very important and essential in a person's life, but you don't want a friendship that's going to take away from your developing and maintaining a positive character, because those are those negative influences that we just talked about in the previous chapter that can cause your life to go downhill very, very quickly. Well, we're going to stop right there and we're going to pick up next class on lesson plan 4, page C, which is going to be the purpose and objective. And our next class will be this upcoming Wednesday, which will be March 6th, 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful evening.